So, welcome to the ninth episode of the Indian Market Story. We're here to talk about the Indian IT sector, one of the growth engines of the country, and a fantastic story of success over the last 3 decades. But before we jump into the conversation, I want to take a second to apologize to our viewers about a different production setup. We've been facing some challenges, but we're hoping that we can bring something new to the table and more consistently present information that highlights what we're talking about. And I'm also going to take a second to introduce, our one of our returning guests, Mr. Dipan Mehta, a market expert and someone who's a very well regarded expert in IT stocks as well. So,
Sure.
Deepan, why don't we start out by tracing the history of the Indian IT sector? I think it's something that you've been invested in for a very long time.
Yeah, Varun, thank you for having me on this particular podcast. And Indian IT industry is something which absolutely goes right to my heart. I think a lot of my success in my career, whatever I have created in terms of business and even wealth, I think a lot of it is linked to the Indian IT sector. It's been one of the most fabulous wealth creating engines in the world, and it has created a great deal of prosperity in our country. So I would just like to go back to the 1990s when I first got into IT stocks and started to understand what the software sector is all about. And that time it was the entire Y2K boom, if you remember, that all
Mhm.
the computer clocks in US were at DDMMYY, and they did not know how the software or the hardware would perform once it went from 1999 to 2000, and so many lines of code were written. So they needed a large pool of talented and educated professionals to go through the code line by line, identify where this DDMMYY was there, and change the YY to YYYY, and
Mhm.
thereafter see and test the application. So suddenly overnight there was absolute boom time in the Indian IT industry, and we would see doubling of the quarterly growth rates of companies. It was such a heady time, 1999 right up to 2000, and many investors in the market, professional investors, savvy investors, missed this particular boom. But nonetheless, I think a lot of new entrants like us, we just took to IT stocks in a big way and had a massive outperformance in our portfolios. But when Y2K was coming to an end, means when we entered the next century, the 2000, there was a great deal of skepticism whether this boom in Y2K and the kind of good run which the IT companies had would now be over, because they have done the biggest project ever in the history of software. But that did not happen, Varun. That's the most interesting part, and a big learning is that the software industry globally, there is no end point, right? It never really reaches a sense of maturity. So there was Y2K. After Y2K, we had internet. So corporates wanted to integrate internet. Then we had application development, application maintenance, remote infrastructure management, and then we had the Internet of Things, use of mobile applications, and that was followed by cloud computing, and so many different trends keep on coming. And today the hottest word is AI. So what the beauty of this industry is that every few years there's a new technology, a new trend, and corporations, governments have to rework their IT systems, and that's where Indian IT industry comes into play. Sorry to be a little long on this thing, but it's an industry which is just truly amazing with absolutely no parallel anywhere else in the world. And even as we
Mhm.
speak, the value proposition of the Indian IT companies remains extremely strong. And just as you want to go to China for manufacturing, when it comes to developing software, we are the world's capital.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on several points there that maybe we should take a second and deconstruct. So the first question, I think maybe some low-hanging fruit. Why is India the center of IT services in the world? I mean, the obvious and immediate answer is the large available pool of talent. But is there something deeper than that, or and how is this story of India being this becoming the center of IT almost played out? Because I can't imagine it started that way. Back in 2000s, I think we know that India wasn't such a large component of global IT spends.
In a very cynical way, you can attribute the success of the Indian IT industry to 250 years of colonization, because the British gave us the English language, and we became the largest English-speaking nation in the world. And that's where most of the codes are written. That's how the language is the language of communication as far as the software industry is concerned. And we had a large pool of English speaking engineers. We had a pretty well developed engineering college network, and
Hmm.
there were just not enough jobs for these engineers who came out of college. And that's how we had the English speaking engineers available, ready talent available for the US corporations, European corporations to tap and start developing or maintaining their IT system. So the underlying thing is the demographics of our country, the language, the education system. I think the IITs have been there for decades, and they also had a very, very important role to play in the revolution, IT revolution, which has taken place. And also, I think rightly so, but on Indian IT companies, they invested a lot in education. I mean, they knew
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
engineers who were coming out from the colleges were not ready to start coding or ready to, do their tasks or jobs efficiently. So they kept on investing a lot in training centers. And in fact, when you talk to Infosys, TCS, HCL Tech, back in the 2000s, they were always very proud about their training campuses, and that's where I
Hmm.
think a lot of training has taken place, and that's just gone on, and that knowledge has got passed on. And Indians are great at relearning, so we don't get stuck in one particular technology or one particular language. We go with the flow, and whatever the
Hmm.
customer wants, whatever is the flavor of the season, we're able to modify and mold ourselves to that. And that, I think, is one of the very important attributes which we can attribute to the success of this industry in India.
Hmm. So I guess let's move on from the supply side to the demand side almost. We started out with the Y2K, the Y2K crisis almost that the Indian IT sector was there to solve. And I think from there we moved on to, client server side applications and then the internet and then, managed services. But obviously the IT sector is sort of evolved through that space. What are the trends, I guess, that we see in the future that are going to continue to drive demand? I mean, AI in particular is one, but anything else that we're hearing about?
Who knows, Varun? I think 3 years ago we did not know about AI, and Chat GPT was unheard of. And now every corporation wants to integrate Chat GPT or AI into their applications. And then who would have thought of COVID? And mind you, COVID really drove IT spends phenomenally because everybody wanted to work remote, and that
Hmm.
just changed the dynamics of the entire corporate sector globally, where you wanted every service for your employees, for your customers, for all your stakeholders. You wanted it on the spot and remotely from them sitting in their own office or home.
I'm gonna
So,
I'm gonna interject for a second here because we have some really fantastic statistics, and I'm gonna share my screen to try and highlight
sure.
this because we have some really cool statistics that show how global IT spends have evolved through the pandemic. And I think you can see, this huge surge in IT services spending
Yes.
as well as in data center systems. Went from $3.8 trillion globally to $4.4 trillion globally. And that 2021 spending and 2022 spending has been much, much higher than the global GDP growth, which sort of tells us that the intensity of IT spending or IT spending as a component of overall spending is expected to continue to go up and beat GDP growth quite handsomely, actually.
Yeah, that's true. I think now IT is so central to every operation, to every activity in the world, that I don't see that IT spends will ever, in the near future, have any kind of a slowdown. And these trends, today it's AI, tomorrow it could be something else, and next year, 3 years from now, some other trend or technology may come into place. And all the time, I think technologies get redundant, new softwares, new technologies, new products come into play. And that's what keeps on driving growth. I mean, can you imagine starting any new business, any new venture, any new activity in the world without the use of IT? It's just not possible. And I think
It's
that
not
puts
possible.
India in a very sweet
You know
spot.
what? You know what it is it's that now every business is a technology business. If you're not a technology business,
Yes,
you're not a real business, right?
yes.
And I think that puts the Indian IT sector in a really sweet spot because if everybody needs technology, you just have to go to the place where you have the most people. I'm not necessarily sure that the big IT services companies may be the best people to capture that value, particularly given the high base they're growing off. But overall, I think the Indian IT sector is unquestionably poised for a really really bright future.
That's
I was
right.
running, I was running, I was running some numbers actually, and so the over the last 10 years, global GDP has grown at roughly 2.5%. But over the last 10 years in that same time span, IT spends globally have gone up almost 3.54, really 5%. Which is not unsurprising because the intensity and the importance of IT is going up. But simultaneously to that, I think maybe I'll try and find the graph to highlight that
That's the
that
one, yeah.
India's share of the global IT expenditure has gone up from 2.5% to 18.5%. So it's almost a 6x increase. And if we, I mean, going by the demographic trends, particularly the fact that the global population is aging and the availability of labor is falling, I think it's fair to assume that the Indian IT share of global IT spends will quite feasibly go from roughly 20% where it is currently to maybe 40,
Yeah,
50%
that's true.
by the end of 2030, which is which means that the base market is growing by almost 12 to 14% compounded, which is a fantastic place to be.
That's right, Varun. You're right. I think many positive upsides for Indian IT sector, but you have to manage the success as well. And in the 25 odd years which I have been looking at IT companies, many companies have come and gone, and many companies have got acquired, and there have been a few failures as well. And there are a few learnings also for investors as well as people in the IT industry. And all I can say is that companies which did not go with the trend, who did not remodel themselves, who did not rewire themselves, they've been the biggest losers. I think you have to go and again retrain your employees, rework your systems, have a solid knowledge base in place, and have systems to update your knowledge. Those are the ones which have really succeeded. I think the number of times the likes of Infosys, TCS, HCL Tech have adopted, understood new technologies, implemented it, and still ensured fantastic customer satisfaction has been the highlight of the industry. But I think, Varun, we are reaching a very good, I would say, a good inflection point within the IT industry as well. And I'd just like to elaborate a little bit that over the many years, that I've been tracking the IT companies, it was the mid-cap IT companies which were not able to clearly find a place in the sun, so to speak, and their growth rates
Mhm,
were generally lower than the large-cap IT companies. But this time around, last 3 4 years, I have seen that the mid-cap IT companies have really bloomed and matured, and they are focused on specific niches within and specific geographies, which is why their growth rates now are higher than large-cap IT also.
mhm. And I mean, I also think part of that is the whole remote working drive, particularly post pandemic. Because I think pre pandemic, if you needed an IT services company, you needed someone you could trust. And to build trust, you needed someone to be face to face. And the only people that were able to do that were, your large cap IT companies that could afford to send people in volume abroad and bring them back and, hire people in the US and the UK. But now that that's not a requirement anymore, I think the seas have parted, so to speak, for a small IT company sitting in Bangalore or Mysore or Noida, wherever it might be. they can establish a connection digitally with a client and service them properly the way they want to be serviced, which is I guess why this opportunity has emerged for them.
Yeah, that also, and also I think Indian mid-cap IT companies, they are focusing on areas and technologies where they have a edge, because end of the day, size it does matter. It is a competitive advantage, but there are at least a handful of Indian IT companies, mid-cap IT companies, which have made a place for themselves, and their customers are really happy with the kind of work they're offering. They're able to take on small projects. Their agility, the quality, their understanding of the technology, the delivery aspect, all of this is sometimes better than the large cap IT as well. And from an investor's perspective, I think small is beautiful, because even smaller
Mhm.
order flow, smaller projects can generate you that 15-20% type of a top line growth. Whereas for a large company, they now really need 50, 100, $200 million contracts to kind of move the needle for them. So from an investing perspective, I think the mid-cap software companies, I think, have a far better future than the large-cap IT companies. But of course, there are risk factors attached with that, because typically mid-cap IT companies have a very high degree of client concentration. And if one or two of their large clients suddenly decide to
you know
stop the projects, then that does affect the
you know
performance.
before we get into the risk factors in the mid cap IT companies, I want to focus on this, large, um, these large contracts, because my sense is that these large IT services contracts are a thing of the past. From a technology perspective, they just don't make sense anymore, because a large IT contract for a giant piece of the entire software estate is really not a smart enterprise IT strategy. Because I mean, on two different counts. First is you don't want to you don't want to do a large piece of work all in one go. The way you want to manage your enterprise IT estate is you want it to be microservices driven, you want it to be small, you want it to be modular, you want to diversify across a lot of different products, that are specific to a certain need. And then one by one, based on when upgrades come, you want to upgrade that in terms of really small contracts. And that sort of runs contrary to this whole big contract uh, you know uh, culture or system almost. And I take this from I take this specifically from my time at Accenture, where I saw that the importance placed, or rather the availability of big contracts, was really declining. And the company re-engineered itself one or two times, as they often do, where they had a larger volume of contracts, even though they were slightly smaller, and they incentivized, the mid to senior management, the MDs that were directly responsible for client contact, to build a volume of work as well as a large value of work, because it's also more deliverable. If something goes wrong in a $100 million contract, then that whole contract's gone. But if something goes wrong in a $5-10 million contract, okay, you may lose that contract, but that the remaining 40-50 million dollars worth of work that's split up across tiny pieces is still secure. So I mean, the industry is definitely going to have to reinvent itself, from at least from my perspective, because that big contract, I don't see that being real anymore.
You may be right, Varun, but it maybe what happens is that the contract size is large, but it's broken up into many components, and it is over multi-year period. So when a global, say, Fortune 500 company wants to revamp its IT system, it wants to rework its business model, it wants to offer something new to its customers or its other stakeholders. That's when an Indian IT comes into play. And you made a very important point that agile systems is the way to go. So sometimes these contracts or these orders flows which come to the Indian IT companies, they're not completely formulated. They don't have the complete picture or visibility of what the output will look at the end of the day. But they keep on experimenting, iterating, and then they have something which is which is really creating a lot of value for the customers. So I think that's the way going forward for the Indian IT, I would say, projects per se. But there are certain very interesting global trends also which is driving IT spends. And I would like to just highlight this entire EV revolution, which is happening
Mhm.
in the auto industry. And you have no idea that the amount of software and the technology spends which the automobile industry is doing at this point of time is absolutely amazing. I think, every single auto company now wants to do EV, and EV, a large part of it is because is the software component. It's basically, when you're buying an electric vehicle, you're buying a computer on wheels, and there are just so many components over there, in terms of infotainment, in terms of security, in terms of driving without any
Managing the
driver safety.
powertrain,
Yeah,
battery management systems, brake optimization and recharge systems. There's a lot of like it's really like I think a computer on wheels is a really great way to put it because that's what it is.
absolutely. So that's one big, I would say, global disruption trend which is driving IT spends. The second is this telecom and 5G. You know that, Varun, 5G is going really fast all over the globe. I mean, China, US, Europe, almost everybody is on 5G. And with that kind of internet speeds, you are seeing many new applications also being developed, which could never be have been developed again, especially on entertainment, on gaming, on e-commerce, social media. All of these things are suddenly just spiking up because of the speed of the internet. And then every player within that particular segment is looking at increasing their IT spend just to keep pace with what the competition is doing and what their customers are expecting. So first he spoke about the EV. The next big trend is this 5G and the way it is spreading, in terms globally, in terms of what applications can be developed around it. And then, of course, we already spoke about Chat GPT and artificial intelligence. I think most companies want to weave that into every application of theirs and see what results come out of it. So I think broadly, these are the three large pools or trends which are driving IT spends. And companies which are focused, especially in either of these three or all of these three, which have the necessary, I would say, skill set and the employees to deliver projects in these three, I would say, verticals. I think their future is phenomenal, and we can talk about specific companies also.
I'll ask another question before I think before we move on to specific companies, which we really should. But um, another area that I was thinking of that I think may drive IT spends globally is also utilities. Because over the next decade, what we're going to see
Yes.
is the electrification of a lot of the energy infrastructure and the integration of renewable energy. And where once you had maybe one coal power plant or natural gas power plant or whatever it might be, now you have solar parks and wind farms, which are very software intensive because you have a number of devices to maintain and manage and improve, um, and from that perspective, I think that the utility sector should drive a lot of IT spending, particularly in Europe, because it's not a question of want anymore. It's a question of need. I think there's a demand for renewable energy. There's a demand for electrification, and along with that will come a lot of IT expenditure to manage that.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, of course, I think in manufacturing also they're using more and more robots. In healthcare, we are seeing a lot of medical procedures being done through robotics, through remote infrastructure management. There are so many technologies which are playing out for various verticals within the IT industry, that if a company is just focusing on one or two of these verticals and they have a niche, or there are some very special skills, or I would say projects to offer, or even IP to offer, those companies I think will be the winners. And I think we should go on to understanding all the Indian IT companies, a few of the larger ones, and especially some of the mid-cap IT companies, which I think have got a great future because they're doing something innovative or something different.
So why don't we do a quick whistle stop tour of I guess the really big ones, and then we can maybe jump into some of the mid cap or small cap IT companies that you've got your eye on. Why don't we start with the giant of the Indian IT industry, TCS? I mean, if you could give us maybe a minute or two on how it started and how it's evolved and even something about its most recent results, which I think were received quite positively.
No, but I want to start with Infosys, if you don't mind. And
All
I
right,
share
all
that
right.
picture with you. I share that picture with you. I want to share to the viewers. That for me is when Indian IT industry was born. See, Infosys is very different from any other IT company. It was there for many years. Varun, the Infosys IPO actually devolved, which means that people did not even apply for the shares which they were offering, and the underwriters had to buy the shares of Infosys that too at par. I mean, and from there to be such a huge wealth creator is just phenomenal. And Infosys, not only the software part, Varun, but they got so many new ideas and so many new themes they got into play. I mean, that level of corporate governance, the honesty, the integrity with which they operated, I think that is just absolutely pervasive across the IT industry. And they drove so many entrepreneurs to think like them, to act like them, to be honest with their customers, to be fair to their employees, to be good corporate citizens. I think all of that benefit, or all of that, I would say, foundational work was done by Infosys, and a lot of credit does go to them. So a little bit about Infosys. As I said, the IPO did not do well, but then they had their moment in Y2K. They were bang in front of it, and there was a time when they were growing 100% quarter on quarter. And as I said earlier, this is one company which has kept on transforming itself, right from Y2K to internet to application management to software products, remote infra, you name it. They have been in the front of every cutting edge technology. And this is one company which has delivered consistent and secular growth rates over the past several decades or so. Uh, but to
Recent
be
results are
fair,
very disappointing, though. Yeah,
sorry,
they didn't really live up. Recent results are quite disappointing. They didn't really live up to the expectations that.
that's where I think you have seen this turbulences do happen from time to time, but it's a great company, and eventually I think they will ride out this soft spot which they are in. So that's about Infosys. Then let's go on to TCS. TCS, of course, is the largest Indian IT company and among the top five in the world as well. And it goes back to, as I said, it's Candido 1966 in the building right across over here was where it was born. And I remember one story told to me by the founding chairman, Mr. Kohli, and he used to say that there was a time that they would code in Naraman Point in the Air India building, and then put it on a
Mhm.
floppy disk, and someone would carry it on an Air India plane to London or New York, and then put the floppy over there in the computer system in their client location, and then copy the program and then run the application. I mean, can you imagine? Your generation hasn't even seen a floppy disk, what it looks like, but that's how it was done back in the 1990s. So, they've also gone a really long way. And TCS, because of the Tata name, they have been able to attract some very good talent. I would say the highlight of TCS is the talent, is the quality of leadership. They kept on having very good CEOs who managed the company for decades on end, who were themselves very hardworking and very dynamic, understood technology very well, and they really built a fabulous business, which has got no parallel anywhere in the world. Now, looking at Infosys and TCS, we had many other companies also come into play. HCL Tech, also set up by Mr. Shiv Nadar, was another shining example. And they were very early on in terms of new technologies, especially in the telecom industry, which was they were very much known for. And since then, they have diversified into many verticals. And HCL Tech, what is different about it is this focusing on software products. And Varun, that's one of the criticisms leveled against the Indian IT industry, that they never develop software products per se, like Microsoft or like Google Chrome. They were always servicing these larger companies, but HCL Tech is taking small
I
steps.
guess I'll ask a question here because that doesn't fully make sense to me, and I'll come at it from two different angles. Now, first is that the leader in the IT services space globally is Accenture. I mean, that's pretty much unarguable. They don't- they don't focus on software products. They focus on partnerships with software product providers and quality of service delivery, and they've done fantastically well. So I guess that's one, I guess, pushback on that criticism. And the second dimension to this is that it's more important for a corporate to select the right software product and integrate it well, because that's the real continuous value, and maintain that infrastructure. And I'm not sure why the criticism is relevant, because it's a completely different thing. It's not like, once you've built a software product, it's plug and play and that's the end of the story. That's not really how it works. That's not how it makes sense. So why is this criticism relevant?
No, it's relevant because we've seen a great deal of value being created by the likes of Microsoft and Google, Apple, and these are all product companies, and they have used Indian talent to develop their products per se. So we just feel that why not? Why don't we have a Windows operating system done by an Indian company? We have the talent, we have the market as well. So anyway, that's not relevant at this point of time. I think. More and more we are seeing Indian startups developing cutting edge technologies. So coming back, I think HCL Tech is focusing on software products. Then the fourth largest company is of course Tech Mahindra. It was actually a joint venture between British Telecom and Mahindra, and they were also on very strong on the telecom side. And the company really came into focus when mobile telephony took up all over the world, and British Telecom required Mahindra British Telecom, that's what it's called at that point of time, to manage their systems and to develop applications for themselves. And thereafter, I think we have seen many Indian companies, mid-sized companies, come into place. They were all formed around the 2000s or so, when continuously we were seeing IT spends. Many of them were set up by promoters who were earlier working for these larger IT companies as well. And since then, I think we have seen at least 50, 60 odd IT companies which are scale, which make a difference, which have a very strong role to play globally when it comes to the software industry. And right now, I think in the industry may be going through a slightly soft spot because of global macro headwinds. But these companies are gearing up for growth. The foundation is very strong, and once we have all these kind of global issues of interest rate inflation sorted out, and even a minor uptick takes place in tech spending, you will see that Indian IT companies will be first off the block, again going back to their historical growth rates.
That would be really, really positive to see. So within the mid cap space, is there anything that you've got your eye on that you think is a really interesting play?
I'm all smiles when you talk about mid-cap IT, because they've also been great value creators. And I'd like to highlight a few companies which we have invested in, and which I think have got a great future. The first company which comes to mind is again a Tata Group company, Tata Elixi. And for decades, Tata Elixi was really going absolutely nowhere. They tried their hand at many businesses, many verticals, but I think the real inflection point was when Tata Motors took over JLR, and JLR required a software company to manage their IT systems and to do all the kind of projects on the EV side. And that's where Tata Elxsi came in. JLR became the largest customer for Tata Elxsi, and the rest is history. It's been one of the fastest growing software companies of the last decade or so. And from there, they've gone on to healthcare, they've gone on to media as well. And their critical, I would say, skill set is developing the absolute embedded technologies which go into products, and that's been
Mhm.
something which is their specialty, and they're able to compete on their terms with the large IT companies as well. So that's one company which comes to mind. Another one which is a very interesting company is again Persistent Systems, which also has had exceptional growth rates last 3 to 5 years or so. Again, over here they focused on IP, they focused on specific verticals, especially providing their services to the technology companies in US. And the technology companies in US have been consistently growing, and essentially they need to keep on spending on IT to keep their products and systems going, and that's where
Mhm.
Persistent Systems came into play. Then another interesting company is KPIT. Again, like GL, Tata Elixi, they focused on automobile sector per se, and across the board, whether it was, as you said, powertrain, battery management, driverless cars, all of the entire ecosystem of the EV, wherever software was required, I think KPIT has developed products, they've developed IP, they've also developed a nice pool of talent which can take up such projects, and right now they are having phenomenal growth rates. Another success story that we should definitely talk about is Larsen and Tobro. Varun, for an engineering company to remodel itself, so they took out their IT division and they formed Larsen and Tobro Infotech, which was a fast-growing company, which was mainly into engineering services, but they went into BFSI as well. Then they spun off Larsen and Tobro Technology, and then they acquired Mindtree, and Mindtree and LTI have been merged now to form the fourth largest company. So I think Larsen and Tobro also had a very nice strategy in place for the IT industry, and they've created a lot of value in the two companies which are listed just now. Like that, down the line, I think we've seen many companies, which have that 3 to 5 years of fabulous growth rate. Mastech, which focused on UK government orders, has had its place in the sun. Same is the case with NIIT Technologies, now called as Coforge. They were very aggressive into going after larger deals, and their growth rates were purely dependent on superb marketing at their end. There's Emphasis as well, which is one of the large IT software companies, which was earlier owned by Digital, and thereafter Blackstone took over the company, and that also has been very aggressive when it came to marketing. So each company with a large cap or mid cap has got something special in it. Could be a vertical, could be their marketing strategy, could be a global preference, could be IP, something or the other which has been their key core strength, which has driven these companies, and therefore they're able to grow at a much faster pace.
Fantastic. I mean, it seems like there's a bouquet of options for investors, and seems like we have a bright future going forward for the Indian IT industry.
That's right. But I just want to say one thing that being an investor in the market for almost 30 years, now I'm seeing a situation where the boys will be separated from the men, the wheat from the chaff. So there was a time for many, many decades, you would have kind of similar growth rates for all the IT companies. If Infosys was growing at 20%, everybody was growing at between 17 to 23% or thereabout. But now that variance is going to only increase, and you will reach a situation where there'll be some IT companies, the mid cap ones I spoke about, which can grow at 20% plus. But you may find a Wipro which is growing at 2% as well. And we didn't speak about Wipro per se, has been another great value creator, a fantastic company promoted by the Premji family. Few people know it was earlier called Western India Products Company, Wipro, and it was into many other divisions. And then software was became, of course, the largest division for the company. So, coming back to the point I was making, is that from this point on, you need to be extremely selective. There'll be companies, if you have studied their business model well, you've understood what their value proposition, which vertical they are focusing on, and if you're confident that those verticals, the tech spending is going to remain strong, those are the companies which will grow, continuously grow at anywhere from 15, 17% to 25% as well. But there'll be run-of-the-mill companies doing legacy projects, which are
Yeah.
not, larger in size. Maybe they'll find the growth going a bit slow as well.
Alright. Well, I think that's a really interesting takeaway for our investors to stay focused on what they buy and pick the right stocks. And hopefully we've left them with something really interesting to think about.
Yes.
And yeah, I want to say, a big thank you for sharing your thoughts and wisdom on the subject. And I want to thank our viewers for joining us as well. And hopefully we'll be back in about a week's time with some fresh new information for them to digest.